So in order to properly understand the Last Supper, we need to go right back to Exodus and look at the first Passover. Then Moses summoned all the elders of Israel and said to them, "Go at once and select the animals for your families and slaughter the Passover lamb. Take a bunch of hyssop, dip it into the blood in the basin, and put some of the blood on the top and on both sides of the doorframe. None of you shall go out of the door of your house until morning. When the Lord goes through the land to strike down the Egyptians, he will see the blood on the top and sides of the doorframe, and will pass over that doorway, and he will not permit the destroyer to enter your houses and strike you down. Obey these instructions as a lasting ordinance for you and your descendants. When you enter the land that the Lord will give you as he promised, observe this ceremony. And when your children ask you, 'What does this ceremony mean to you?' then tell them it is the Passover sacrifice to the Lord, who passed over the houses of the Israelites in Egypt and spared our homes when he struck down the Egyptians." Then the people bowed down and worshipped. The Israelites did just what the Lord commanded Moses and Aaron. At midnight, the Lord struck down all the firstborn in Egypt, from the firstborn of Pharaoh who sat on the throne to the firstborn of the prisoner who was in the dungeon, and the firstborn of all the livestock as well. Pharaoh and all his officials and all the Egyptians got up during the night, and there was loud wailing in Egypt, for there was not a house without someone dead. So we know from Exodus chapter 12 verse 40 that the children of Israel were in captivity in Egypt for 430 years. And they cried out many times that God would deliver them, that he would set them free from their captivity. And God heard them, and deliverance came, but it came in the fullness of time. It came in God's perfect timing. And God indeed set his people free from their captivity, but critically, he set them free according to their covering by the blood. So the Passover was always pointing forward to the Lord Jesus Christ. It was the covering of the blood that enabled God's judgment to pass over his people. So the Passover always pointed forward to what the Lord Jesus Christ would accomplish in his short time on earth. So back in Mark's Gospel, Jesus is preparing for the Passover, but the passage begins with the disciples asking him, "Lord, how do we make preparations for the Passover?" So they wanted to prepare this meal for Jesus and for themselves. And so they asked their master, "What should we do? What preparations do we make?" And so Jesus then gives them these very specific instructions as to how they should go about this. So the disciples, when they came to make these preparations, they found things just as Jesus had said. It points to something so profound that God, in his magnificence, his sovereignty, his amazing eternal grace, has made a way for us to be covered by his blood. So we can look back again, we looked at Exodus, but we can look back again even further to Genesis chapter 22, and you'll be probably familiar with the story, the testing of Abraham, when God, having finally given him the precious son Isaac, God then tests Abraham and asks him to sacrifice Isaac. And it's particularly telling in verses 6 to 8 what is being pointed to. So Abraham took the wood for the burnt offering and placed it on his son Isaac, and he himself carried the fire and the knife. As the two of them went on together, Isaac spoke up and said to his father Abraham, "Father." "Yes, my son," Abraham replied. "The fire and wood are here," Isaac said, "but where is the lamb for the burnt offering?" Abraham answered, God himself will provide the lamb for the burnt offering, my son." So God did indeed provide for the offering. In the case of Abraham and Isaac, Isaac was spared because a ram was given. You'll remember in the story that just as Abraham is about to kill his son, the angel of the Lord cries out and says, "Do not harm the child." And Abraham looks up and he sees a ram caught in a thicket, and the ram becomes the sacrificial offering. So with Isaac, he was spared because a ram was given. For us, we were spared because a lamb, the Lord Jesus Christ, was given. So as we walk by faith through life, we will find all things according to God's provision. We will find all things just as God has said. And that takes faith and it takes trust. And in those times when we're assailed by doubts, when the storms of life seem so very great to us, we must stand firm knowing that God has accomplished all things for us. He's accomplished those things already. We already have the victory in the Lord Jesus Christ. The Last Supper is a fascinating episode in the life of the Lord Jesus because it means so much, and yet the disciples understood so little. For them, it was a traditional meal that they were going to share together, but for Jesus, it represented so much more. It represented the death that was coming to him very soon, all in accordance with God's plan. And Jesus was humbly submitted to the will of God, even to the point of death. And as we break the bread and drink the wine, we remember that all things are according to his perfect plan.